Masechet Menaḥot Daf Lamed Het. We begin the fourth perek, which is about the laws of sisit. The Mishnah teaches, Tekhelet ena me'akebet et halaban, ve'halaban eno me'akeb et Tekhelet. Ideally, in sisit, you need both blue strings and white strings. And the Mishnah teaches that in this case, if you don't have the blue, then it will not prevent one from fulfilling the mitzvah of the white. And if you don't have white strings, then that will not prevent one from being able to fulfill the mitzvah of having Tekhelet. Tefillah shel yad ena me'akebet et shel rosh, ve'shel rosh ena me'akebet et shel yad. And similarly, ideally you have two tefillin, shel rosh and shel yad. But let's say you only have one. So if you're lacking tefillin shel yad, we don't have it, you can't put it on because you don't have an arm, or you just don't have a tefillin shel yad, that will not prevent one from fulfilling tefillin shel rosh. You could put on only the rosh. And similarly, shel rosh, if one does not have the tefillah shel rosh, but only one tefillah of yad, so not having the rosh will not prevent one from fulfilling the mitzvah of tefillah shel yad. The Gemara asks, Lema matintin de la kerebi. It would seem that this Mishnah, regarding having the blue and the white, is not the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, which is curious because Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is the redactor of the Mishnah, and yet this opinion is against Rabbi and in accordance with Chachamim, as we learn in a Baraita de Tanya. Uritem oto melamed sheme'akebin ze et ze. Debre Rabbi, Chachamim omerim en me'akebin. Baraita quotes the pasuk Uritem oto. You will see it, and somehow that teaches that the blue and the white are necessary for each other. You cannot fulfill one mitzvah without the other, one part of the mitzvah without the other. You need both ingredients, the blue and white strings, according to the B. We'll see how Uritem Oto teaches that. And Chachamim say, no, they are not required for each other. So, a simple reading definitely sounds like the Mishnah is in accordance with Chachamim and not the B. But first, we're going to explain how the B learns this from Uritem Oto. Mai Tama de B. What's his source? Tichtib hakanaf min kanaf. Uchtiv petil Tekhelet v'amarachamana Uritem Oto adika tarvaihu behad. Let's look at the pasuk for a minute. It says benatenu al sisit hakanaf petil Tekhelet. So you have kanaf and petil Tekhelet. So from the word kanaf, the kanaf means the corner, and that means that you have to have a string that's of the same type, same species as the corner, meaning as the garment itself. Now, most garments in those days were white linen, and therefore that teaches that you have to have a string that's the same color as the garment, and since it's usually white, you're going to have a string that's white. Then it says, kanaf, then it says petil Tekhelet, a thread of blue, and so that means that you have to have blue. So that's how we know that you need both white and blue. And then the pasuk after that says Uritem Oto. You have to see it, meaning you have to see the collection of both of these things together. So you need both of them as one in order to fulfill any mitzvah at all. That is the source of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Rabbanan, how will they interpret that word, those pesukim? Uritem oto kol had lechudeh mashma. Uritem oto, see it. Oto is singular, not uritem otam. So you see that each part of the mitzvah, it can be fulfilled individually. Ideally, have both, but if you have just white or just blue, then that's okay. Lema de like it be. So we repeat our question that we started with. It seems that our Mishnah would not be the Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, which is possible, but we'd like to, if we can, reconcile the Mishnah with Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and we do so. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, afilu tema Rabbi, la nisracha ela lekadem. Rav says we can say that our Mishnah is in fact a Rabbi, and we're not talking about a case where you have only white or only blue, because in that case, yes, you're right. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi would say it's no good if you don't have white or blue. Rather, the Mishnah is talking about which one is first. Okay, what does that mean? Which one is first? Some say it's which one you put in first into the hole in the corner of the garment. But more likely interpretation is which one do you wind first? That you have to, when you're doing the windings, it has to be of a certain color first. Let's see. Detanya. Mitzvah lehakdim lavan letechelet. Bimigdim techelet lelavan yasa. Ela shechiser mitzvah. Abraita teaches that the ideal mitzvah is to wind the white first and then wind the blue string. And if you did it the other way around and you wound the blue first before the white, you fulfilled the mitzvah, but you're lacking in the mitzvah. What does that mean? Mai chiser mitzvah. What do you mean he's lacking in the mitzvah? Ile ma chiser mitzvah de lavan, v'kiyem mitzvah de techelet, l'rebi akube me'akeh b'hadadeh. If you say that means that he's missing the mitzvah of Lavan, and you fulfill only the mitzvah of Tekhelet, well then that wouldn't make sense, because we just said that we want this to be both according to Chachamim and also according to the Rabbi. And the Rabbi says that if you fulfill only one half of the mitzvah and not the other half, in other words, you have blue and not white, or white and not blue, then you don't fulfill it at all. So it wouldn't make sense to say that this is called Yatzah. He fulfills the obligation, but he's missing a mitzvah. That's not true. So you're supposed to put the white first. Let me just explain first what that means, that we put the white first. Here are different opinions. There's lots of different opinions among the Rishonim about how to tie the strings, how to wind them. So there are many opinions, but what you see, the common denominator is that they have a white first. So here, this is the Yemenite version based on the Rambam, and so you have one white winding first, and then all blue, and then another white at the end. Another one is you have one white and in the beginning and the end. So you see that they all begin with winding the white string. So that's what the Baraita is saying, that ideally you put the white string first, and if you wound a blue string first, you fulfill the obligation, but you're missing out on the mitzvah. So what do you mean missing out on the mitzvah? If you say that, well, you didn't wind the white first, so it's like you didn't have white, and you're missing the mitzvah of white, but you fulfill only the mitzvah of blue, but that can't be, because the Rebbe says if you have only one or without the other, then it's you're prevented from fulfilling the mitzvah completely. And so therefore, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, shechiser mitzvah va'asa mitzvah, umay chiser mitzvah de la avad mitzvah min hamuvchar. Rav explains that the Baraita can still reconcile with Rabbi by explaining that when it says you did not fulfill a mitzvah and you did fulfill a mitzvah, well, which one is it? Sounds contradictory. What does it mean that you are missing out on the mitzvah? That you do not fulfill the mitzvah in the optimal way. Okay, so that's what he means. The mitzvah, the best way to do it is to wind a white one first. However, if you did the blue one first, you fulfilled it. You fulfilled the obligation of mitzvah tzitzit, but you didn't do the ideal way. Okay, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi would agree with that, because you have both white and blue strings. If you didn't have any white strings and only blue, or you had you're missing blue and had only white, then Rabbi Yehuda Nasi would say it's invalid completely. You do not fulfill it. But the Mishnah is not talking about that when it says me'akev. Each one is not necessary for the other. It's not talking about not having it at all. It's about which one you wind first. And everybody agrees that you should wind the white one first. However, if you did the blue one first, it's still valid. Okay, good. So that's a good answer. And now we're able to reconcile the Mishnah with Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. But so far we only reconciled part of the language of the Mishnah. Ha-tenach lavan deno me'akevet ha-techelet. So that explains the line that says the white, meaning not having white, which now we understand means you have a white string, but you didn't wind the white first. That will not prevent one from fulfilling the blue. If that makes sense. But how do you understand this? Tekhelet and me'akevet ha-lavan. That has to mean if you didn't wind the blue first, then it will not prevent you from fulfilling the mitzvah of white, even though you did the blue first. Maihi. Well, when would you ever wind the blue first? We just said that you should always wind a white one first and then the blue. So what does that mean? That Tekhelet ena me'akevet et halavan? Amar Rami bar Chama la nisracha ela letalit shekula Tekhelet. Rami Bar Chama explains that we're talking about here where the garment itself is blue. It's entirely blue. In that case, the first winding should be blue, as we're about to explain. So the first winding is not always white. It's just usually white because usually you have a garment. But the point is, whatever the color of the garment is, that's what you should, that string, that color is the one that you should wind first. And so this phrase, Tekhelet eina me'akevet et lavan, means if you have a blue garment, then you should do the blue winding first. If you didn't, you still fulfill the obligation. And that's how we're going to explain it now. Itmar nameh, amar Levi lishmuel, aryoch, la tetib akarach, ad demefarshat li leha mileta. Levi told Shemuel, he called him Aryoch, which is honorific, means like a king, because Shemuel was like a king. Do not sit on your feet. Don't sit down. Don't do anything until you explain this to me. I really have to understand it, and I don't want you to do anything else until you explain it to me. Tekhelet eina me'akevet et halavan, v'halavan eino me'akevet hatekhelet. Maihi. What does this mean in the Mishnah when it says that not having Tekhelet does not prevent you from fulfilling the white, and not having the white does not prevent you from fulfilling the mitzvah of Tekhelet? Amar le, la nisrachela lesadin besisit, the mitzvah laktume laban beresha. And he says, it's not about not having a white at all or not having a blue at all, but rather, we're talking about when you have a linen cloak, which is usually white, and it's saying that you should put the white winding first. My ta'ama hakanaf, min kanaf. The sources, as we said before, when it says hakanaf, according to the corner of the garment, means that the first thing that you're going to wind should be of the same type, the same color as the garment. But if you wound the blue one first, it's okay. B'di'avad, you still fulfill the mitzvah. Tenach lavan de'eno me'akevet ha'techelet. Techelet de'ena me'akevet et halavan maihi. And we asked the same question as we did before, so that we can get to the answer that we already established. We already mentioned the answer, but here it is again. So that makes sense. That answer makes sense if you to explain the line that white, the not having white does not prevent the blue. That means if you didn't tie the white first, then and you tied the blue first, it's still okay. But what does it mean? Tekhelet eina me'akevet et halavan. If you didn't tie the blue one first, but when would you have to tie the blue one first? We just said that you tie the white one first. Amar le Rami Bar Chama lo nisrachela le talit shekula tekhelet the mitzvah laktume tekhelet beresha takanaf min kanaf akdim lavan beresha letlan ba. Rami Bar Chama says, and it sounds like in this discussion here, this is what Rami Bar Chama originally said it. We just beforehand we jumped the gun a little and just wanted to quote it so you know where you're going. But this is the original discussion. And he said, oh, well, you know what that line means? It means if it's talking about a case where you have a garment that's entirely blue. If it's entirely blue, then the first winding has to be made with Tekhelet. As it says, hakanaf min kanaf. Hakanaf means from the same type, same color as the garment. So you should do the blue first. If you wound the white first on a blue garment, so b'di'avad, it's still valid. Amar Rava, midi siv'a kagarim. Rava rejects the approach that we just said, and he says, does the color of the garment really determine which which string you should wind first? So Rava disagrees with this entire approach. Ela amar Rava, la nisrecha ela le gardomin. De'i gardam tekhelet v'ka'e lavan, ve'i gardam lavan v'ka'e tekhelet let lan ba. Rather, Rava interprets the Mishnah. Again, this way it will be reconcilable with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. And he explains that the Mishnah is talking about severed strings. And it teaches that if the Tekhelet had been severed, let's say you start off with everything proper, you have the blue, you have the white strings, you tie them properly, and there's a nice length to them, they're all good. And then after that, the blue strings get severed at a point when, like over here, you have the knots. The knots are okay. But after the last knot, it gets severed, and then there's only a little bit left. So that could be a problem. And so he teaches that if the blue got cut, but the white is still there and long, then that's okay. And also, if the white got cut off, there's only a little bit left, but the Tekhelet is still nice and long, then also the tzitzit are kosher. And that's what the Mishnah means when it says that the white does not cause, a white meaning if the white is cut, then it will not cause the blue to be a problem, and if the blue is cut, it will not prevent one from filling the mitzvah with the white. You can have something cut. If, however, you're missing white altogether or missing blue altogether, then the Rabbi Yehuda Nasi indeed would say it's not good, whereas Chachamim would say as long as you have one, you can still fulfill that mitzvah. Tamri b'nei Rabbi Chiya, gardome Tekhelet kesharin v'gardome ezob kesharin. After all, the sons of Rabbi Chiya say that the severed parts of the blue are valid, but if you had and also that if you have a severed section of hyssop branches, that's for the sprinkling of the paraduma waters, that is also okay. Now, how long does it have to be to still be okay? It can't be nothing, so how long is the minimum length that's still okay? Amar Ba'abar Hamduri, Amar Shemuel, Kedeh le'onvan. Enough to make a knot, to make a slip knot in that remnant that is left beyond the last knot. So let's call that, an inch. Right? So you started off and you had the blue and you had the white and everything's good, but then the blue got cut off and you have only an inch left, but you can still make a knot. Then the tzitzit are still kosher. We ask, in order to make a knot, does that mean to tie them all together or just each one by itself? Is it enough? Let's say there's the blue, one of the blue ones got cut. So do you need enough that you can tie all the strings together? That would be longer. Or just that one string to make a knot in it. And so we leave that question unsolved. Ba'e Rav Hashe, alime dela mi anvi, ve'i havu katine mi anvi mai. Rav Hashe says, what if you have a string that's thick? And because it's very thick, 1 inch is not enough, and you can't make a tie over there. However, if it were thin, then you would be able to. So what do we say about that? Does the thickness matter, or do we say we measure it by the amount? If you had a thin string, let's say 1 inch is sufficient to make a proper knot, and so therefore it has to be 1 inch. And even if it's thicker, still, and you can't make a knot with it, the point is it's still 1 inch. Or do we judge it based on the thickness of each and every string? And if it's a thick string, maybe you need 2 inches in order to make a knot. And Rav Ache, the son of Rava, answers Rav Hashe's question, and he says, if it's thick, all the more so it should be better because it's more recognizable. If it's thicker, it's more seeable that you have, look, there is at least part of a blue string there. So therefore, the answer is we judge by the thin string. Let's say that's 1 inch. So then if it's thicker, even better, and you only need 1 inch, even though actually you couldn't tie it because it's too thick. Man tana de pareg alet de Rabbi. Let's say try to identify who is the Chachamim who argue against Rabbi, and they say that if you have just blue or just white strings, it's still okay. Hay tanahu de Tanya. Rabbi Yitzchak omer mishum Rabbi Natan. Shamar mishum Rabbi Yosef Galili. Shamar mishum Rabbi Yochanan ben Uri. And lo Tekhelet matil lavan. So it is this Tana that we name in this Baraita. It's actually a long list of names that Rabbi Yitzchak says in the name of Rabbi Natan, who said in the name of Rabbi Yosef Galili, who said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. So it is a long tradition that if there's no blue, it's okay, you can put white. And this is an important halakha because for hundreds of years, the blue was lost until it was recovered more recently, some decades ago in Israel. They found the actual snail, and on the shore, they found a whole pile of these snail shells. They could reconstruct that this was the one. And so we have the Tekhelet, most likely you have the original Tekhelet. But for hundreds of years, we didn't have Tekhelet. So if you followed Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, you'd say, if you don't have Tekhelet, you cannot fulfill the mitzvah. You wouldn't be able to do tzitzit at all. But the halakha does not follow that, but rather this opinion that if you don't have Tekhelet, you can put white, and you can still fulfill the mitzvah with white. אמר רבא, שמע מינה, צריך לקשור על כל חוליה וחוליה. די סלקה דעתך, לה צריך, הדאמרי בני רבי חייא, גר דומה תכלת כשרין, וגר דומה אזוב כשרין, כיוון דאשתרא לאילי, ishtere lekulaha. Rava says we can derive from the statement of the sons of Rabbi Chiya that you have to make multiple knots between each and every set of windings. Here's a standard sisit that has, you make one set of windings and then you make a knot, and then another make a knot, and so you make knots every so often, and that's a good protection, because that way, even if one of them gets undone, and this is going to get unwound, you still have a protection over here, and it will stop there, and you could fix it. Okay, so because if you say that you don't need any knots, then that which the sons of Rabbi Chiya said, that they said if you just have a remnant, a severed piece of Tekhelet is okay, and they also said that about a hyssop, since if it would get loose, the top one would get loose, and the whole thing would get loose. And so how could they possibly say that, let's say 1 inch is sufficient? 1 inch, if you have just one, a little bit past the last knot, then that knot is likely to get undone, because there's only a little bit of string that just gets pulled the wrong way. The knot will get undone, and if that knot gets undone, and you don't have any backup knots, then the whole thing will get undone. And so there's no way that they would have said just a little bit of string is sufficient if there were no backup knots. And therefore, it must be that you have to have these multiple knots between every set of windings. But we reject that because we say, Dilma di iketar. Maybe the sons of Rabbi Chiya said that you only need a little bit, if indeed you had multiple knots as backup. But they weren't necessarily saying you have to have multiple knots as backup. If you don't have knots as backup knots between the windings, then you would need a longer string. So they said a shorter string is okay. In that case, they were talking about a particular case where you had multiple knots, and that's why they thought a backup string. But it doesn't mean that in general you have to have the multiple knots between each set of windings. Ve'amar Rabba, shema mina kesher alyon deoraita. Disa kadatech Rabbanan, mai isterich lemishte sadin besisit, peshita, hatochef techifa achat eno chibur, ela shema mina deoraita. Rabba says we can learn that the top knot is required mid deoraita. There's some discussion what the top knot means. Does it mean the last one? That's what we were just talking about. Or more likely it's the first one, the very first knot that you place there. You can see from the context that we're going to talk about in a second. This knot is required mid deoraita. The other knots, extra knots, are required only mid rabbanan. Because, how do you know? If you say that even that first knot is only required mid rabbanan, so that would mean that on the doraita level, you don't need any knots at all. You just attach the strings, put it through the hole, and just leave it there, and mid doraita, that would be okay. If that were the case, then why would the Torah need to teach me that it's permitted to use a linen garment and put wool sisit? The Torah has to say, by juxtaposition, that it's permitted to have shatnez on sisit. Now, why would you have to do that? It would be obvious. After all, if someone just makes a single connection between a wool and linen, then that's not considered a connection. If you don't make a tie, so they're just touching each other. It's just one is touching the other, and in one connection. That's not enough of an attachment that one would be liable to shatnez in the first place. You'd only be liable to shatnez if you make a tie. So if you make a knot. Now, if you don't have to make a knot, then obviously you can just put one thread of wool through the linen garment, and that wouldn't be a problem. You're just putting it through without making a knot. That certainly wouldn't be a problem. But yet the Torah does need to come and tell us, shatnez is not allowed except for sisit. So we can learn from this that otherwise, if not for this permission that the Torah is giving, it would be shatnez. That means that at least one knot is required mid deoraita. Baruch Adonai leolam. Amen ve'amen.